here. Hello to everybody who's watching us today, joining us today. It's wonderful to have you here. I hope that Kate and I add some value on this platform for anybody watching, listening globally. Those who have been following me on LinkedIn will know I also have a YouTube channel. So this is going live on YouTube as well as live on LinkedIn. And, the purpose of this entire interview is to shed some insight. I hope that both I can do some credit to Kate's questions, and equally, I hope that I will learn a lot from Kate as well during this interview. So here we go. I'm going to pass on the floor to you, Kate, to let you introduce yourself. Anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Manwara Ali. I advocate about leadership. I believe in lived experience adding huge value to people in leadership roles who work in changing, bringing communities together. And I'm also a CEO of a charity and a director of a CIC. So over to you now, Kate.
Great. Thanks, Monwara, and hi, everyone. This is my LinkedIn Live and YouTube debut, so apologies if I'm a little bit stilted as I go along. I'd just like to say thank you to Monwara for giving me this opportunity. I'm currently studying a Master's in Voluntary Sector Management with Bayes Business School, and part of that Master's program was to shadow a CEO in an area of the voluntary sector that you either work in or that appeals to you. And for me, I'm very, very interested in small and local charity management, which is why I'm doing the Masters. And when looking for a CEO to shadow, I didn't actually have to look very far. Monwara is very well-renowned and well-regarded in our community, and we live in the same local area. And just from, I'd never met Monwara before, but just from knowing of her reputation, she was the first person that I thought to approach, and very grateful that Monwara agreed to it. So for the past 3 or so months, I've spent some time with Monwara and in the Waltham Forest Community Hub as well. So for today, I've got a few questions that I just wanted to run through with Monwara, focusing more around Monwara's leadership style, which is what the purpose of my shadowing has been, just to help me get some clarity for my end of project assignment. So Monwara, my first question, or it's more around, I guess, a little bit of your background and your history. You've spent the last decade or so leading the Waltham Forest Community Hub, but prior to that you've studied law and you've also worked in the public sector. So I wanted to know what it was that's set you on the path to becoming a charity CEO and why this sector?
Okay, right. So my career, my initial ambition was to be a lawyer because I wanted to put the world to right. Everything that was going wrong, social injustice, covering all the subjects that I sort of felt passionate about was the criminal justice aspect. And so I always thought that by studying law, becoming a lawyer, I'd be able to make change. And having had that training in law, picking up a legal practice course where I was actually not only, had acquired a lot of education in the theory side of things, but being able to put it into practice, and then doing 5 years of casework. Having worked for public sector over a 10-year period, I learned so much about the differences in the two standards, how the public sector had far more resources. When I went to work for the charity sector, I realized it was completely the opposite. I also realized that, not very many people want to work in that sector because pay is low. However, I started to develop that, that original hunger I had in wanting to make change and make communities better, improve things. I just started feeling as though I could do that within the charity sector, because I had seen the other side of things. And even though I like to think that my leadership is very much about balancing, and that even though I strive for excellence, I'm not actually putting that level of pressure on the people around me and the people I manage, I still felt that it was so important for me to bring that into that sector, from the public sector, the excellence, the tools, the capacity, the resources, which the voluntary sector and charity sector lacks. Also, the other thing was, when I'm talking about resources, the other side that I think the public sector and the charity sector are very different is the impact, because many of us go into the public sector because, for career development purposes, and we want to better ourselves, to develop ourselves, drive our career forward and grow. But quite often in those jobs, what we're doing is focusing on paying our bills, but not necessarily focusing on the impact. Whereas in the charity sector, you really see the impact. You could spend £1,000 on a project, and the difference it makes is maybe, like 100 times more than you would find in a public sector job. So for me, that was the difference, the huge disparity between the two. And that was probably why I ended up in a job soon after I was in a public sector job. I'm not going to say where I learned a huge amount, 6 months of training nonstop, and it's really pressurized environment. However, I hated the job. Within 9 months, I wanted out. And it took me almost 6 months to find another job. And my first job that I found, where I got out of that sector, was working in a women's refuge.
Okay.
And it was like being put into, like from, I won't say out of the frying pan into the fire, because it wasn't, it felt like I had to hit the ground running. And that's when I realized, actually, I had all the capabilities to be able to do that. And that environment, I found, very much also did not provide support. So you had to more or less, like, just do things on your own and be your own, self champion. And I found that I could do that. And the more I did it, the more I realized I'm good at this.
Yeah.
So, but the only downside was undervalued.
Yeah. Do you think that that's still an issue in the voluntary sector, in the third sector, around the lack of, I guess, external recognition and value of what that sector brings?
Definitely, 100%. I think that's still the case. And I think a lot of it is because CEOs, people, senior leaders in positions like mine are not advocating to make that change.
Yeah.
I know that I've been in jobs where I've had to fight. I've had to fight to say, you know what, we should be paying more, because this job is, requiring a lot. And I think I've been in environments where I feel I have certainly felt that people have stayed, the turnover has been low because people have felt valued. And value isn't just, the occasional acknowledgement and thank you. Value is also in monetary terms, because everything's changing, the world is changing, things are more expensive. Why are we not reviewing salaries? And why are senior leaders not having the courage to do that? I know that I've been to my board and said, we should be reviewing. My board have been quite considerate and conscientious, but not every charity or voluntary sector is like that.
Yeah. I think also, so many charities are operating on a shoestring budget. There's just not any capacity to be able to absorb any increased cost in salaries for so many charities. It's a really difficult position, but then, you have to look after your staff, and you've got to be able to attract staff. At the moment, there's all sorts of issues with turnover and retention in the sector, and recruitment issues in the sector, and probably not just in the charity sector, but across, all industries. And if we're not looking after staff and making sure that they're able to meet their financial commitments as a bare minimum, then the charities won't exist, because there won't be anyone to staff them.
Absolutely. And the part that I didn't actually say earlier is my thoughts around being shadowed.
Yeah.
I think I was excited when you asked me. I had no idea where you heard, what reputation you heard about. All I know is it was such an honor and an opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity for me to learn more about myself and how I can improve.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you've been able to get, you know, out of this process something of value, because I recognise in asking you that it was potentially going to be quite one-sided. I'm there observing, and I'm learning and building my knowledge base, but there is that question of, well, what am I able to give back to you? How are you going to benefit from this process, or how was the hub going to benefit from this process as well? So I'm glad that it's given opportunity for self-reflection for you as well. I guess, talking about that, so you mentioned in your introduction that obviously you're the CEO of the Community Hub, but you also have lots of other roles. You're a director of a CIC. You've got a very active sort of life and family life and social life. Can you tell us what a typical day for you, a typical week for you looks like at the moment? So your week as CEO, but fitting in everything else that you've got going on.
It's a little bit mind-boggling. If I have ever experienced burnout, I probably don't even know that I did. But I will go back to the way I've been tuned from a very early age. From the age of maybe as young as primary, secondary school age. I was always a carer for a parent, juggling school, juggling home life, lots of difficulties at home, domestic violence. And then one point in my life being heavily pregnant and also homeless for about 3 weeks, living in a hostel. A lot of that experience has always helped me. One, the resilience that came out of it. The other thing, when I say resilience, I mean knowing that life can get really, really hard, but yet there is still a light at the other end. You just have to bear long enough to be able to get through to the other end. The other thing that I think, when I said the caring responsibilities, you learn the more you do, the more you're able to do. But obviously, in a lot of us that tend to be really extrovert, so like you will see people like me full of energy all over the place and doing too much often. But with time and with age, I have learned lots of different ways and tools that I've adopted to invest in me. And that's what I wasn't doing maybe in my 20s and my 30s. Because I was everywhere. I still remember leaving the house and picking up a sandwich on the way, going to my job, from uni to my job. And my father would be saying to me, I could hear him in the background shouting, sit down and eat, sit down and eat. And I don't have time to sit down and eat. So going to the hub job, the CEO role, on a Monday, I'm not working. So on a Monday, I could be doing things relating to leadership. So I would have clients, I have mentees. I'm a mentor for a couple of institutions, so I support them. But also I do the charity work. So being a director of Stowe Inspire, Mondays I don't work. 4 days a week, I'm a CEO. Now, what a lot of CEOs will probably agree with me is the world is changing and we need to be honest about how we do our work. Just because I write a bid at maybe 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night, and I am actually nowhere to be seen at 10 a.m. the next morning, it doesn't mean that I'm not working. It's just CEO jobs have to be really flexible. CEOs need that flexibility where they're actually slitting in and out, but also focusing on their own well-being. And I have to say that I have staff members who've really helped me with that. People that are more focused on, the introverts who are more focused on the well-being side have been the most amazing, influence on me, because I noticed I wasn't making time for myself. I wasn't resting enough. I was feeling guilty when I was doing an hour's walk because I should be doing emails. So I have to say, so that was, so going on to the Tuesday and what I do as, I could wake up on a Wednesday morning, go and walk for a couple of hours or an hour and a half. I just live near a park. That's my morning. While I'm walking, I could be on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Right. and then I'm doing all my engagement. Remember, the CEO job is not just doing the job. We've got lots of connections and communities that I'm a part of, or via LinkedIn as well. So there are council officers, people that I work in partnership who reach out to me using LinkedIn, and there'll be messages. So I do that. But then I also have a team who are more than capable of managing the services when I'm not there. So typically on a Tuesday, after my funding bid, the next day, I could be doing a little bit of me time in the morning. By the afternoon, I could be doing emails. I could be attending a meeting in the evening in a church, because it's a community group and it might be something that's happening in the community. For example, at the moment, you've got the Pakistan floods. So there's a lot going on in terms of fundraising. There's the CEO isn't just fulfilling their title. There's also those relationships that need to be maintained.
Yeah.
Networking enables that.
Okay. It's not a desk
Monitoring.
job. It's not a
Yeah.
desk job.
But then with on a I would say with another on another note, say for example, what happened last week was we had rain
Yeah.
and the roof started leaking. And I was sitting in another room and like having a telephone conversation with someone. I finished and I heard this loud noise, came into the hall, and I saw water literally coming down the walls. It's a very old building we have, originally built in 1866. So I went running to my two of my colleagues and said, "Help!" You know, they came out. Between the three of us, we fixed the problem. The drains were blocked.
Ah.
So when you say what's the typical CEO day, there is
Unblocking drains. Yeah, of course.
yes, yes. You know, the thing is, my colleague did that, but there was another time when we had a senior who, you know, like no one could help them because they had had an accident, and it was like me and another colleague. And I remember, I still remember that day when I started helping her, and she said, "No, no, no, you're the CEO, don't touch it." And I said, "But if you can, you know, like I'm human. Like this, yes, I have a title. I know when to use my title, right? I know my position. I can be authoritative when I need to, but I think there's a time when something needs to be done, it needs to be done. And you can have that attitude or you don't have to, but that's just my way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an all-encompassing role. You can get pulled into anything at a moment's notice, and there's no such thing, I think, as structure. Certainly in my observations, and the time that I've spent with you over the last few months, there's no 2 days that look the same. You're going from one event to a networking meeting to mentoring to writing proposals and bids to meeting with potential funders, and it's quite exhilarating, I think. But if you're a structured person in nature, I imagine that can also get quite stressful for some people. And I noticed that, right at the start of this conversation, you talked about you don't know what the feeling of burnout feels like, because you're constantly, running from one thing to another, and you've now know how to manage your own self-care and make sure that you're looked after. But it's really interesting. I was reading recently about how being engaged with what you do is the antipode of burnout. You won't ever experience burnout if you're fully engaged in what you're doing. And it sounds like, all the activities that you undertake keeps you really engaged, both through your work, but also through your other activities that you're doing as well. So, that may be why you're not experiencing burnout.
Maybe. And I think also a lot of people who know me are quite surprised sometimes when I say I'm a planner, and they say, "No, you're not. You can't possibly be a planner." But I am. Those are my tools.
Yeah.
You hear it sounds a bit cheesy, but like, when people say if someone says somebody is visionary, I think quite far ahead, and I've always been like that. Even like, in my 20s, I was already thinking about, okay, what am I going to do next year? We have, I think I've said this before, we have family plans. you know. And the reason why I do that is because I learned it was the only way that you can do lots of things.
Yeah.
Because most of us are either unhappy because we can't pursue our passion,
Mm.
our job doesn't allow us to do that. I've always wanted to create a job that means I can still prioritize my family and my children, and I never was interested in the title of CEO. Yet, the more I did, the more I deserved the title. Yet, I think I don't know whether it's a woman thing. Honestly, I just felt like, okay, I don't want no fancy title. But then your average person, I've learned in this sector, in the voluntary sector, your average person who takes responsibility is often quite shy of
Mm.
the title.
Yeah.
And people seem to have a problem with the word leadership because they think of the worst extreme.
Mm.
I don't know how you feel about that. Do you get that impression that when people think of leader, they think, you know, I don't know, somebody who's got too much power and will abuse it?
Yeah, I think there are some people, from their own experiences that have that perception, and I think there's always that, not so much a fear, but there's, the title of CEO, the title of being a leader in an organization, does carry a lot of gravitas, and for people who are not sure of the relationship that they have with that role, it can create discomfort or friction, and quite often it's just around, first and foremost, stepping back and saying, actually, I'm still a person, exactly what you were saying before. First and foremost, I'm a human being, I'm a person. This is my role. It's not who I am as a person. Um, I think through my experience of the studies that I've been doing and listening to lots of CEOs as guest lecturers through my course, one of the common themes that I see coming up quite a bit is this feeling of imposter syndrome. Quite often, CEOs, who, particularly when they're new to the role, kind of get to that position where they're like, why am I here? What am I doing here? I'm going to be found out soon. Why has someone made me a CEO, for goodness sake? Or why am I leading this? And people will often, describe that feeling of being an imposter in their own role, and taking quite some time to feel comfortable and grow into that role, which I think is quite normal, because you don't know what it's going to be like to be in that position until you're in it, and everyone's growing and learning as they go. No one sort of becomes, a first-time CEO and knows exactly what they're doing. They're trying to figure it out. And I think it's important, for those people to be surrounding themselves with the people who have that knowledge and the skills that they don't necessarily have themselves. And I notice it's something that you've done really successfully. You mentioned before that you've got, your team around you. You work really, really well with them, because they kind of understand how you need to work as a CEO. That you could be up until 2 a.m. writing bids and proposals, and that you need flexibility around your role. And you've got a team around you that supports you to be able to do that. And you've got a lot of trust and confidence in your team to be able to manage the day-to-day, the operational things, so that you can focus on the strategic, visionary, longer term process. So yeah, I think it's been a learning experience for me as well, recognizing that, I don't have to be all things and everything. And, I think one of the things that's always held me back from going for more senior leadership roles is that worry that I'm not good enough, or that I don't know enough, or that I don't have enough skills or experience. And what I've recognized from shadowing you is, actually, you can surround yourself with that. You can bring people with you who have those skills and who fill the gaps, in the knowledge and experience that you don't have. And you can still be a good leader. So,
So
yeah.
what would you say are the absolute non-negotiables then in the CEO?
I think it depends on who you've got around you. I think, again, one of the things for me that I struggle with personally is being really vulnerable, and being and being open, in my personal life. And I've always seen my professional life and my personal life as quite separate, and those boundaries become more and more blurred. And I think people are recognizing now that you bring more to a role, whatever your role is, if you can bring your whole self to that role. If you can be completely transparent about yourself and what your needs are, then you'll work better, you'll be more engaged, you're less likely to have burnout. But I think, you know, I was having this conversation with a colleague of mine yesterday, actually, around, you know, certainly the generation of workers coming through now expect that of their leaders. They expect, you know, vulnerability and transparency and authentic leadership, and they find it really difficult to work in environments where that doesn't exist. Whereas perhaps some of the, you know, people like myself who've been working in the older guard for sort of 20, 25 years, that wasn't my experience when I first joined the workforce. It was very much kept separate, and I didn't know a lot about the personal lives of my leaders and my managers, and, you know, I never questioned or challenged that at the time. But perhaps if I had have had more, you know, had more of a relationship with the people who managed me, you know, as I was coming through my previous career, then, you know, it might have been a more enjoyable, less stressful experience for me. Yeah, it's interesting because it is the thing that challenges me the most, I think, you know, really trying to reconcile that, you know, I can be my whole self in a work setting. It's not my natural disposition.
No, that's really interesting. Lots of people talk about vulnerability
Mm.
and being your normal self and empathy, having
Yeah.
empathy as a leader. But what does that mean in action? I feel like I haven't, like other people, gone on to leadership training courses
Mm.
where I have been told I need to behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
Most of my learning has been very organic. And if I just give you an example of having empathy and being vulnerable, I would say putting that into action, because you asked that question earlier, what does a week look like? I could walk in or to work on one day, say on a Thursday or Friday, when everybody's in the office. And I can tell you by the time I've left, every single person has come and had a conversation with me,
Mm.
talked about either what they're doing or where they're stuck.
Yeah.
And that kind of relationship doesn't happen overnight. It takes time.
Yeah.
And it always has to come from leadership, where leadership makes it, creates the safety within a safe environment for other staff to feel it's okay if things are not going well, or they feel that there's a problem within the organization, and they feel confident enough and comfortable enough to talk to you because they feel like you have a way to do something. In a couple of my previous jobs, I often remember people saying, Manwara, you might make magic happen. Now, whether that was because of my title or because of my nature, I shall never know. But that could be a typical day, and often I'm sure my bosses would wonder, what's she getting paid for? She just came in and had conversations with people and walked off. But so much gets done in those conversations.
It's about building the trust and the psychological safety for people to feel confident coming to you, and knowing that, you know, they've made a mistake or they need help, and putting themselves into that vulnerable position, and knowing that there's that trust there, that that's okay, you know. And that takes time. It's all about relationship building. And, you know, I think that's the thing that we're seeing more and more now, with leadership, you know, and people being those authentic and empathetic leaders, is, you know, that happens naturally for those type of leaders. They build that trust, they build those relationships quite organically and quite naturally, as you said. Um, it, One of the things I really admire, you know, in observing your leadership, is that you don't just lead in terms of, you know, the Waltham Forest Community Hub. It's not just the team that you're managing that you lead. You extend that out to all aspects of your life. And we've discussed previously, you know, I'm not great with social media. I don't tend to engage with social media, and even work-related social media like LinkedIn very well. And it's something that you engage with really actively. And your authentic leadership comes across not just in the way that you work with the hub, but in the way that you communicate with the wider public as well. So I guess, why do you think it's important for people to see both your professional side and your personal side on that wider platform, when it's not necessarily people you're working with on a day-to-day basis, or necessarily will ever meet? Why do you put yourself out there on those platforms?
Well, I won't say those platforms, but definitely LinkedIn.
Sure.
YouTube was just an accident. In years to come, I'll say it was a beautiful accident. But I feel that, you talked about vulnerability and building trust. How can you build trust with people if they don't really know who you are?
Mm,
So if you come across on any sort of platform or in any environment and you're just playing a role, you're not actually being yourself, because my role is just part of me. It's not everything.
yeah.
A human being has so many different sides to them, so many facets. I'm a mom, I'm a manager, I am a local community leader as well. When things went wrong during the pandemic, it wasn't just the hub. My neighbors were reaching out to me.
Mm,
My people from north of the borough that I consider friends were reaching out to me. Um, Local MPs, councillors were talking to me, and vice versa. I was reaching out to them for help. So I think it's important when we talk about vulnerability and we talk about authenticity, you cannot hide who you are. And I think, like you get found sooner or later, but you can't expect to create psychological safety for other people if you can't be yourself.
yeah.
And this is where the problem lies. I meet people and I will be in a group of complete strangers. I can tell from the body language and what's really going on. My children have made me so much more self-aware
Yeah.
than I used to be, and I have to say that a lot of credit should also go to the team I manage at the hub,
Yeah.
because I've known them for so long that I have seen so much growth in them and me. And I think that self awareness and that reflection, like I said to you, I'm a planner. Part of my planning is that I
Mm,
reflect often. I walk away from a situation, I think about it. I don't overthink
yeah.
because I'm very future focused. And
Mm,
that's probably why sometimes I miss my now.
yeah.
Hence the lack of, and I have to remind myself, I have to force myself, I have to make it consistent for it to work. If I'm walking every morning, it will work. If I tried every other morning, it doesn't work.
Yeah. You mentioned before around you didn't attend leadership training courses specifically, as you were progressing through your career, and you've mentioned the importance of having the tools and resources that you need to make sure that you can manage in your own space and in your own life. What are some of those resources and or support networks that you have in place that help you to become the leader that you are?
I think for me, mentoring and coaching, I've always had informal mentors.
Okay.
So maybe not a course per se,
Mhm.
but I've always had mentors one after another. And even in my current role, I have a couple of mentors. And the thing is, because of the strategist, the vision, I'm always thinking ahead, okay, where can I go next? So at the moment, for example, I invested most recently a few months ago on a leadership coach. She's actually a course creation coach. She's coming on the climb with me. But that was money that I invested on myself, because there was a part of me that felt like, okay, if I die tomorrow with everything that I hold, I take it with me. I want to leave it behind or find a way that I can impart that knowledge. But then, I also like doing all the missionary stuff abroad, and that costs money.
Mm,
So I thought, okay, I'm going to invest in myself, in a course creation coach who will teach me how to create a leadership course where I can pass on and impart everything that I know through that course. I am currently talking to a number of people, and I'm going to run the first part of the course in October. So, first time ever. I'm going to deliver it, but I know that that will be the beginning, and that will give me a chance to try and test and improve and make sure I'm passing things on. So, your question around, how do I'm lost now. I got lost.
The support and the resources and
Yes,
the tools that
yes.
you have.
So mentoring, one, and this is why I decided to be a mentor myself, the formal and informal mentors, and the investment. So I've paid for things where I know that I need those things to make things happen. For example, apps. And like, I have an app which I use now for recording, and I record and I have things then transcribed,
Oh, okay.
so that speed things up for me. So like I said to you, with time, what happens is you invest in yourself and you learn, and also allowing the people around you to help you more.
Mm.
When you think you're a savior, and the fault lies in my stars. When you think you're a savior, or have for years, not anymore,
Mm.
then what happens is you often are constantly looking at ways to help others and not thinking about, okay, how can I, and not even asking. I ask a lot.
Mm.
I ask for help. For example, the group that are coming with me, somebody there was able to design logos and do a t-shirt, and I asked, and she's doing it. And I'm not paying her.
Mm.
She is doing it because that's what she wants to do, and it's her skill set. So
Yeah.
that thing about one using and tapping into, you didn't notice my son just walked in earlier, made me a cup of coffee, left it on the table. Now, now, he's 23, but once upon a time, I would never ask him for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And maybe he would have, a few years back, not even thought of making one for me.
Yeah.
But now sometimes, like, I think in a responsible position, even if you know how, you have to stop,
Yeah.
because you can get in the way of others. And that's the thing I've learned the hard way. You can
Mm.
get in the way of others, and you can also end up as a leader, uh, diminishing people's opportunities or potential to grow.
Yeah. And I think that that's really challenging, particularly in the voluntary sector and in smaller community-led organizations as well, because they are small. There's not endless opportunities like there would be in a larger organization to allow people the chance to grow and develop and follow their passion. You have to create that space for them, and it can be quite difficult. You've got to be very aware, I think, very self-aware of what you have the capability to do, and being able to create that space, but also being aware of what the needs of your team are. And that comes, coming back to that trust, and knowing that you can have those open conversations with people makes that a lot easier, I expect. But it is one thing that I've noticed with particularly with small charities. How do you create those opportunities for people when you've got limited resources, limited budgets, and limited time available, and everyone's coming in to do their job? I don't think there's an answer to it. It's as you said, it's having that level of awareness around it, and making sure that we know that actually we can be a blocker for people when we're trying to help, by trying to do everything ourselves. And it's interesting what you were saying about the feeling that you need to. People feel that they sometimes need to be the savior, or the ones to do everything or fix everything. I think it's another thing that's more inherent in this sector, certainly, than in the private sector where I've previously worked, is this feeling that people come and work in the sector, and they come and take lower paid jobs because they want to feel like they're contributing, and they want to feel like they're doing good work, and that's a big motivation for a lot of people. But in doing so, they're potentially also creating barriers and blockages, because they're thinking that they need to do it all themselves. And it's not, it shouldn't be about the individual. It should be about the impact that they're making. That's what the focus should really be.
Absolutely. And when you say impact, I think also some of us don't use our influence enough.
Mm.
I think, especially in our sector,
Yeah.
sometimes you'll carry a title, and the title itself gives you certain powers
Mm.
you can influence. And either that influence can be used for you to use your voice to advocate for others, or you actually use your influence to open the space for somebody else.
Yeah.
I don't think we do enough of that. I don't think we use our influence enough. I know that I try to.
Yeah.
I try to, as in whether I'm in a meeting or wherever, I can sense maybe that's my personality type. I can sense where somebody in the group has really good ideas, but for whatever reason they're not being encouraged or they're not being engaged. I will use my influence by making sure that that person's view has been heard, and that means sometimes you do have to sort of coach people a little bit, really persuade them to open up because they may not feel comfortable, but we lose such great value when we don't.
Yeah, and I've seen it firsthand with you, how collaborative you are. The the small charity sector space can be quite competitive in terms of funding and fundraising, and people can be quite protective of their space and not very giving of themselves, particularly to other charities and other organisations. And I've seen in you the exact opposite of that. You really foster and value partnerships with all sorts of organisations within the community, including other charities who might do very similar work and might be, in theory, competing for funding with the hub. But your attitude towards that has always been to bring those people together to get the best out of everyone for the community. And it's not about the individual charities or the individuals who are trying to get that funding. It's about where can you maximise the impact for the community. And I witnessed that, when you had the Meet the Funder event recently and brought, a number of different funders together for all sorts of different organisations in the local community to be able to sit there and speak to funders about what it is that they're actually looking for when they're filling out a proposal or a bid application, and being able to have just open conversations, not just with the funders, but with each others, which, I just thought was fantastic. It was, such a breath of fresh air to see someone actually trying to bring these community organisations together and working together. So yeah, I can see that you do that not just at an organizational level within your team, but doing it very much at a macro level as well across the community.
And that's a real joy, because I think the community are realizing that, and that was one of the things that was picked up at our AGM last year, where the general public suggested that we should be leading more as an organization, because and it's that thing you said in leadership that people look for, that feeling of not feeling as if you are in competition with anybody, but more about bringing people together. Because I think personally, like, I come from a background where I was born in Bangladesh, and it's not an Islamic country, and we lived side by side with Hindus and Christians. So maybe my mentality, some of it is from that view, where I have seen where communities have been divided because of the cultural differences and the religious differences. It's what has divided. And if you look back in history, a lot of the wars that have happened, it's a lot of the times it's really easy. And there have been political propaganda, there's been political reasons why they happen, but it's so easy to divide communities on the basis of that. But uniting communities is about making a difference, or making sure at times of crisis what needs to be done is done. And that sometimes means that we won't have enough hands, we won't have enough money in our pocket or food in our homes to meet the such a large need. So we have to unite. And this is where, when you do unite, you benefit so much more, because each person will bring things to the table. We've got 12 people on our mountain climb. Each one of us has an individual network. Why did I feel very confident before we even got started that, we're going to smash this target?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we're going to see a lot more of that collaboration having to happen, with the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis that, everyone's facing. That's really going to hit hard for a lot of small charities, being able to, heat the community hub, for example, the cost involved in that is going to be astronomical. So being able to bring together other members of the community and other organizations, and finding ways to work through these types of crises together is going to be really, really important. And you're already way ahead of the curve on it because you already have those relationships established, and people already know in our community what you're about. They know that you're there to actually, get the most impact for the community. And it's not about the hub, and it's not about you as the CEO. It's about, how do we make sure we're looking after everyone and everyone's getting, the opportunities that they need. It yeah it it's been really really inspiring to actually sit back and be the fly on the wall when I've been shadowing you, and watch that, because I don't think it's something that you can fake. It's definitely just part of your nature in bringing people together and trying to make those connections for the benefit of the community, which is really lovely to see. In thinking about that, I'm thinking about your relationship with the board. I had the opportunity to sit in on one of the board meetings with the community hub recently, and see the interactions between yourself and the chair and all the other board members. How important is that relationship? We've talked about your relationship with your team members and how you're a leader to those team members, but how important is that relationship with your chair and with the rest of the trustees in you being able to be the best person you can be as a leader?
I think it's absolutely crucial. I think many people forget that a board, especially in a small charity, they're all volunteers and they have a life outside of the role that they play at the hub, but they are instrumental because they hold me accountable for decisions I may make, or the way the organization moves forward. If you have a very, very invested, committed board, it means that people genuinely are passionate about the activities and the services that the charity is running. It means that they bring on board, I think I'm not talking just about our board, but generally in the sector. There's a big divide between people that join a board because they need it to build their own career for their own development. And so therefore they join a board, for example, and don't know that what their role is more strategic, and actually they want to be more operationally involved. And that can cause some challenges against. Then you can also have people that join a board that are too strategic. And for example, they can't see the marriage between operations and strategy. So there's also that challenge. I think that the most important relationship is the relationship between the chair and the CEO. And the CEO plays a big role in making sure all the cogs fit.
Yeah.
Because that relationship isn't just about working with your team, because they are also part of the team. They are also part of that vehicle. And that means, making time and effort as well. And one of the things we do quite remarkably well at the hub is we make sure that the entire team, that's trustees, staff, and everyone, is working and moving together. So our away day is that, with everyone in it. We have a team meal once a year, and we do the same thing. Everyone, all trustees, and so it doesn't feel like staff don't. The relationship isn't so sort of distant.
Yeah.
It's a lot more closer. So I think for that reason it's really important. But I think that strategic approach and that objective, operations approach, to make sure that you differentiate one from the other, really makes a difference. Now, I've got friends that are CEOs and they really struggle with their boards, because some boards are making decisions that the CEOs should be making. Whereas you've got other organizations, I've got friends where actually the CEO is looking for direction and the board can't provide the direction because they don't have a vision, and they don't, perhaps the CEO, because it's that whole thing about what you said earlier. I know it sounds like I'm rambling, but I'm not. There is a point to it. That thing you said earlier about you surround yourself or you fill the gaps,
Yeah.
right? In my opinion, who you choose or who people choose as their leader is going to be based on what they think is a non-negotiable, right? And from my experience, being able to trust someone as being authentic is a non-negotiable in a public arena and in an internal work environment. When people see a leader who is authentic, they will follow. But then that leader is not going to be a perfect person.
Yeah.
There's going to be things that the leader won't have. So as a board, you need to look at, or as an organization, it's very important to look at what needs to be. And this is where a board plays a big role as well in all of this, because there are members on the board that also bring different strengths
Yeah.
and capacity. And people don't see that capacity. I've been on so many boards where we've got celebs on there, and actually they could be generating just through their contacts millions of pounds in charity, like, donations, and yet they don't realize they're sitting on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So it's I guess it's really critical, when recruiting for trustees in small charities, to really understand the motivations of why people want to become a trustee in the first place. It's not just, I guess, about the specific skills that they could bring to the board, which is important, but why are they there? Are they there for their own development? Are they there because they want to give back to the community? Are they there because they want to build skills? And making sure that you're getting that right blend of people at board level, not just with the skills and experience, but the right motivations, I guess, to be able to support the organisation is really important. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's no different to if you were recruiting a staff member. You might recruit for a role and you might have 30 people apply. And when you're shortlisting, you shortlist 10, but none of them have 5 years experience in the field that you're recruiting for. How are you going to recruit? How will you decide who's the best candidate? You're obviously going to look for the strengths that are going to come through in the interview and transferable skills.
Yeah.
Because I firmly believe that if someone has a certain attitude and transferable skills, they can do any job with the right support, of course.
Yeah. You can teach skills. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
It's much, much, much harder to teach an attitude.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Attitude is the biggest problem.
Yeah. So, Momora, I touched on before, we're obviously in the sector dealing with, another impending crisis. You've mentioned the Pakistan floods. We've got the cost of living crisis that's happening here in the UK and elsewhere in the world. The energy crisis that's happening. We've just come off the back of a pandemic. It feels like we kind of lurch as a sector from one crisis to another. But I know that you have, you take a very long-term and sort of strategic vision of your role and the hub and your contribution to the community. What do you think are going to be some of the challenges for the sector, over the coming sort of 3, 4, 5 years, as we get past the current crises? What do you think is coming down the line? What do you think is going to be different in 5 years' time?
That's a tough one. But I do think that with the cost of living crisis, that's an immediate, it's not a long term, it's an immediate problem that people need to find a way to overcome. But I've always said this about sustainability. We already have as a community what we need. The only difference is making sure that things are distributed fairly. And when I say fairly, we don't decide how they're distributed fairly. I think charity sector, voluntary sector could play a big role in making sure that we are using social media and various other forms of ways to reach out to actually demonstrate what it is we do as a charity. How are we helping people at a grassroots level? When I say that, I don't mean like, go and interview or take videos of every person you're helping. No, but I think it's really important to demonstrate that impact of your work, because funders will not fund unless they actually know what you're doing. And we're so busy doing, we don't actually take a breather to review and look at what we can do better. So if I give you an example, last year we implemented a CRM system, and that's now producing reports. We've managed to raise some funds, and we've got impact evaluators on board, so we can look at, like measure the impact of our work. I think that's really important if charities are to survive, in terms of find more ways to get funding in. I think CEOs like me need to play a more public facing role. And I say this without a smile, because I'm serious. I'm
I
serious.
know you are.
I'm serious because, like, I think I do understand why they don't do it, because I think it's just personal stuff. It's not easy to do. It's really uncomfortable, and I've always struggled. But the thing that drives me, even now as we talk, is knowing that what I'm doing is actually for a greater good. It's not about me. I think, and this is where you will sometimes be misunderstood. What is it with this woman? She's always in the public eye, that kind of thing. But I think it's important. Nobody remembers an organization where there aren't faces behind it. So you need to have faith, like the person who is running an organization knows so much about it. And I think I've done my best as well with my colleagues. I've got team members that are now doing a bit more public facing, because it's so important. So I think those are the two things. I think the demonstrating the impact, but also making sure that senior leaders are becoming good public faces for their organization. I think that way you are also attracting funders. I've been a lot more vocal. I've joined a lot more forums and networks, and I've utilized my strength. You could be very articulate, but actually it'll be a wasted potential if you don't use that to influence others. So I found funders listening. It wasn't easy getting Lottery and Trust for London in our building, but it wasn't a tactic for us to get money from them because we're already funded by them. It was so that the smaller organizations in our borough could get access. So I think in you say the next 5 years, I think people like me who are not perfect, but we have or can work to improve our non-negotiable as a leader. I think I'd like to see more of those people come forward. And I'd like to think that the community will stop focusing so much on leadership being very corporate like.
Yeah.
Because that's not what our sector wants or needs.
Yeah. Amazing.
Sorry. Just
No, it's as I said at the start, it's been a really transformative experience for me, just being able to see, how someone can lead as a leader of an organization, but as a person in their community and with their family, and wear all of these different hats, and to be able to just merge seamlessly has been really fantastic for me. And we've had lots of conversations over the last couple of months around my own reflections around where I can see my own challenges, my own development. But it really has, this whole experience has really opened up my eyes to the possibilities of what I can do to achieve my vision, which is, to help the community be the best it can be. I want to put myself in a position where whatever skills and whatever use I can be to helping our own community become a self-sustaining community, that's what I want to be able to do. And I can see myself in that place now more than I've ever been able to before, from being able to observe you doing it, for real. So thank you so much for the opportunity for the shadowing for the last 3 months. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Kate. I learned a lot as well. And sometimes I've learned that you don't have to be, sometimes you can just, even if you can do the job, you can just put your hand up and say, you know what, I'm not going to do it this time. I'm going to rest up.
Yeah.
Let someone else do it. But yeah, it's trial and error, I would say.
Yeah.
It has been trial and error. I could have left the community hub 10 years ago, but I didn't. And I think it's because I stayed that I've grown and I've learned so much. And thank you very much for today.
Thank
Thank you.
you. And good luck with your mountain climb. Is it 2 or 3 days' time? When do you head up?
Yes, I on Saturday. So tomorrow morning we're gonna head off. We've got a nine-seater. Three women are gonna drive it down to Scotland, taking turns, of course. And Saturday morning we're gonna start climbing. So fingers crossed, and we are 73% target met. So hopefully we will smash it. And thank you, Kate. I just so appreciate you taking the time today.
No problem. Thanks, Monwara. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.